The gentleman from Kentucky has been granted the floor for unanimous consent. He's requesting permission to enter 2 document sets into the official record. The first collection comprises correspondence from Jeffrey Epstein's victims who have been attempting to obtain their FBI files through Freedom of Information Act requests, experiencing significant delays and obstacles in the process. He believes their difficulties warrant congressional attention and documentation. The second submission involves a heavily redacted document, essentially unreadable due to extensive redactions across the initial 50 pages. This particular document is the search warrant executed against James O'Keefe concerning a diary that had already been surrendered to federal authorities 2 months prior to the raid. Notably, no criminal charges resulted from this action, yet O'Keefe remains without explanation for why the operation was carried out. The Kentucky representative stood to request unanimous consent for submitting these materials. The first set contains communications from individuals victimized by Jeffrey Epstein, individuals who have been persistently seeking access to their own FBI documentation through official channels, encountering repeated roadblocks. He considers it essential to spotlight their ongoing struggles by making this part of the permanent record. The additional document he wishes to include is, frankly, nearly impossible to read given the extensive redactions throughout. This represents the actual search warrant served on James O'Keefe for materials he had voluntarily provided to government officials 60 days earlier. Remarkably, no indictments emerged from this investigation. Nevertheless, he continues to lack clarity regarding the justification for the enforcement action taken against him. Transitioning to current affairs, predicting Donald Trump's next move has become virtually impossible. The situation resembles a spinning wheel of fortune. His approach confounds supporters, opponents, and even those serving in advisory capacities within his own administration. Within mere days, he has reversed American policy positions completely, leaving observers scrambling to understand the trajectory. Consider the situation in Minneapolis, where federal enforcement personnel were involved in incidents resulting in the deaths of 2 American citizens. Without warning, Trump announced intentions to moderate his approach and scale back the immigration enforcement surge that had been disrupting local communities, yet simultaneously his national security apparatus is presenting him with military action scenarios regarding Iran, including potential targeting of nuclear facilities and governmental infrastructure. Additionally, he maintains support for capturing Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, while offering no coherent framework for subsequent steps. This represents a classic pattern: de-escalation domestically paired with escalation internationally, creating contradictory messaging across the board. His advisors cannot reach consensus on what the Minneapolis adjustment actually entails. Legislative leaders are cautioning that his team shifts direction with the coordination of inexperienced operators. Foreign governments find themselves uncertain whether to prepare for armed conflict or diplomatic engagement. The situation is characterized by disorder, and Trump appears to embrace the confusion. Congressional inquiry. Have you reviewed the entirety of the Epstein files? FBI Director. I have not personally reviewed all materials. Congressional response. You serve as FBI Director. This represents the most significant sex trafficking investigation the Bureau has ever undertaken. Ultimate responsibility rests at your level. Your testimony today confirms you have not examined all the files. FBI Director's defense. My focus has been on delivering the safest environment this nation has experienced in modern American history, achieved at unprecedented speed. This is due to FBI personnel receiving necessary resources to reduce homicide rates, combat drug trafficking networks, and decrease the number of trafficked children. Congressional interruption. Those victimized children might appreciate the director actually reviewing the case files. It has emerged that comprehensive review of the Epstein investigation files remains incomplete. When questioned directly, the FBI director acknowledged he has not examined all materials personally. This revelation is striking, given this case represents the largest sex trafficking investigation in FBI history. One would reasonably expect the director to possess thorough familiarity with all documentation. Instead, his stated priority involves enhancing national security, which he characterizes as progressing at historic rates. He takes pride in FBI achievements, declining homicide statistics, disrupted drug trafficking operations, and enhanced child protection efforts. However, critics argue those same children would benefit significantly from a director who thoroughly investigates the files documenting their victimization. Now examining what's actually transpiring. Trump's recent chaotic maneuvers are perplexing, and this confusion appears deliberate. He operates under the assumption that unpredictability provides strategic advantage. However, there exists a crucial distinction between calculated unpredictability and genuine disorder. Presently, we appear firmly entrenched in the latter category. The sudden Minneapolis reversal followed weeks of aggressive rhetoric where Trump and Border Patrol leadership characterized those targeted as dangerous threats, a narrative completely undermined by video documentation. This abrupt policy shift doesn't represent authentic strategic recalibration. It appears to be crisis management disguised as policy adjustment. Trump seemingly recognized that federal agents shooting American citizens was damaging his approval ratings and alienating even Republican supporters. Consequently, he announced a pullback. Yet his officials cannot agree on the operational meaning of this directive. Meanwhile, tensions with Iran intensify precisely as Trump claims to be reducing domestic confrontation. According to CNN and New York Times reporting, his national security team has developed an expanded array of military options against Iran, including potential airstrikes targeting military leadership and nuclear installations. A U.S. carrier strike group deployed to the region heightens the stakes considerably. Iran has warned explicitly that any American military action will trigger immediate retaliation against U.S. bases and naval vessels. We haven't been this close to direct military confrontation with Iran in decades. The developing situation is genuinely difficult to comprehend. While Trump tells reporters he wants to calm the Minneapolis situation, we observe this complete contradiction. How can one simultaneously claim to seek tension reduction domestically while preparing for potential strikes against a regional power that has explicitly promised retaliation? The reality is these positions are mutually exclusive. One stance represents genuine policy, the other is purely performative. Determining which is which becomes the critical challenge. Let's scrutinize what these dramatic policy shifts signify and why the disorder emanating from the White House is so troubling. This transcends mere mixed messaging or inadequate planning. We're witnessing a presidency that appears to operate without coherent strategic framework. It resembles watching a vessel lurch from crisis to crisis, making determinations based on momentary political calculations rather than thoughtful long-term planning. This creates circumstances where even America's closest allies struggle to anticipate our next actions. The Minneapolis situation exemplifies how quickly Trump's aggressive immigration enforcement tactics can collapse under their own severity. For weeks, his administration defended increasing federal agent presence in the city, portraying targets as dangerous criminals threatening public safety. Then came the fatalities. 2 American citizens, Renee Good and Alex Prey, were killed by federal agents, and video evidence contradicted official narratives. This sparked nationwide protests, and Trump's immigration approval ratings plummeted to their lowest point since returning to office. It's ironic that someone who projects an image of never backing down suddenly began discussing moderation. But here's the complication. According to the Los Angeles Times, high-ranking officials walked back retreat discussions, emphasizing the administration hasn't abandoned its objectives, merely adjusting tactics. Meanwhile, HuffPost reported Trump directly contradicted his own official, Tom Homan, who had suggested reduced presence, insisting the enforcement campaign would continue. So what's the accurate account? Is Trump actually de-escalating? Evidence suggests he's simply stating whatever sounds politically advantageous at the moment, without genuine intention of changing course. He seeks the political benefit of appearing to address a crisis without actually modifying the policies that created it. This is damage control masquerading as policy reform, and the transparency is obvious. The Iran situation carries extraordinarily high stakes. Trump's team has presented military options that could lead directly to armed conflict. These aren't limited strikes. They could target nuclear facilities and would certainly provoke substantial Iranian retaliation. They're even considering targeted operations against security officials, which would dramatically escalate tensions. This represents military action previous administrations avoided because they understood the escalation risks in that region. Yet Trump appears to be seriously considering these options, with a carrier strike group already positioned and planning underway. Iran has made clear any attack won't remain confined to immediate battlefields. On another front, chaos surrounding the Venezuelan situation is disrupting global politics, adding to an already overwhelming crisis load. In early January, Trump initiated a surprise intervention, capturing President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, an operation critics have labeled a raid lacking any coherent follow-up strategy. Analysts from Chatham House and War on the Rocks have noted that treating Venezuela as territory to be seized has trapped the United States managing a collapsed authoritarian regime without clear exit strategy. Trump announced the U.S. would oversee Venezuela during a transition period, but this raises numerous questions. What does that actually mean? How long will American forces remain? What happens if the transition fails? Who assumes control when we withdraw? None of these questions have been addressed, creating the impression the administration stumbled into an occupation without strategic planning for withdrawal. The connection linking these crises appears to be chaos as a governing philosophy. While Trump retreats in Minneapolis under political pressure, he's simultaneously weighing military action against Iran and celebrating the Venezuelan intervention. No coherent narrative connects these actions. No strategic vision reconciles domestic pullback with international escalation. Instead, he appears to be reacting to whichever crisis emerges most prominently, making decisions based on immediate political calculations. This creates an environment of profound uncertainty where predictions become impossible. Supporters may characterize this as unpredictability. Critics view it as dangerous incompetence. Regardless, this unpredictability generates concrete consequences for American security and global stability. It's remarkable how Trump's actions are creating instability. If he genuinely believed in de-escalation, there would be consistency in approach. Instead, he discusses peace one moment, then prepares for potential conflict the next. Clearly, neither position is principle-driven. It's reactive to political pressure. The Minneapolis reversal appears to be damage control. The Iran threats could represent serious military planning or another attempt to distract from domestic chaos by generating international tension. Everything seems reactive rather than strategic. Now consider what this chaos means for Trump and America's global standing. It's unsustainable. Eventually, these contradictions will generate consequences. The mixed signals carry real implications. Even his allies are exhausted from constant crisis management. The unpredictability he considers advantageous may ultimately prove a liability. Who can trust his commitments anymore? Regarding the Minneapolis pullback, it hasn't satisfied anyone. Protesters won't cease activities simply because he used the word de-escalate. They demand accountability for the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Prey. They're pushing for policy changes, preventing federal agents from harming citizens. Vague promises to moderate slightly don't suffice, especially when his own team immediately contradicts him about what it means. For his supporters, they're witnessing this retreat and likely wondering what happened. They supported him for tough enforcement and welcomed his crackdowns. Now he's reversing course due to protests. Rather than satisfying either constituency, he's disappointed both. Critics see empty rhetoric while supporters perceive capitulation. He's managed to disappoint all sides simultaneously. The Iran threats raise serious questions about the wag the dog scenario. With approval ratings declining and domestic issues dominating headlines, the Minneapolis shootings, government dysfunction, his timing for escalating military action against Iran appears highly suspect. Previous presidents have faced accusations of using military action to divert attention from domestic troubles. Now Trump appears potentially following this pattern. During impeachment proceedings, similar accusations emerged. It seems whenever a president faces political difficulty, suggestions of attacking foreign adversaries emerge. These accusations gain traction during political turbulence, even when not entirely justified. Consider Trump's Iran deliberations. Even if they stem from legitimate security concerns rather than domestic distractions, public perception of wagging the dog will shape reactions. The Venezuelan situation clearly demonstrates what happens when actions proceed without solid planning. Trump pursued a dramatic move, capturing a foreign leader and declaring America would manage Venezuela. However, he didn't contemplate what would follow. Now analysts indicate the US is trapped managing a broken authoritarian regime, facing responsibilities without capacity to control outcomes. We have presence without strategy, commitments without clear objectives. This is what happens when foreign policy prioritizes dramatic headlines over careful planning. Certainly, Trump enjoyed the glory of capturing Maduro and demonstrating American power, but reality is now asserting itself. Arresting one leader doesn't resolve Venezuela's fundamental problems, and Trump appears uncertain how to proceed. Trust represents another critical issue with allies. How can they rely on a president who constantly contradicts himself? When Trump announces retreat in Minneapolis while advisors insist the mission continues, which version should allies believe? When he discusses reducing domestic tensions while preparing potential Iran strikes, what's the actual policy? Foreign governments need to understand American intentions to plan their own responses accordingly. Business leaders require predictability for sound investment decisions. US agencies need clear guidance to implement policies effectively. Trump's chaotic approach complicates all of this, leaving everyone constantly guessing and adjusting, creating uncertainty that impacts everyone interacting with his administration. Consider adversaries. They might misinterpret these mixed signals. If Iran believes Trump is too preoccupied with domestic issues to act on military threats, they might provoke a response. Conversely, if they sense he's seeking a wag the dog scenario and might strike regardless, that could trigger dangerous consequences. It's genuinely difficult to comprehend the level of chaos surrounding Donald Trump's governance approach. He oscillates between retreat and escalation, contradicting his own team more frequently than not. Take Minneapolis, he announced a pullback, then his advisors reversed course. There are threats of Iran strikes that could trigger regional war, and Venezuela, where he's committed the country to occupation without clear exit planning. China, Russia, and North Korea are observing this chaos, attempting to determine Trump's actual intentions. The more mixed signals he transmits, the greater the risk of serious miscalculation leading to conflict. Each crisis he mishandles reinforces the perception that his presidency is fundamentally out of control. People can tolerate some drama, sometimes they even find it engaging, but eventually it becomes exhausting. They want confidence that government is stable. that someone competent is in charge, that crises are being managed rather than manufactured. His approval ratings are declining because people are tired of constant turmoil. These shocking moves might generate headlines, but they're not building genuine support. Watching Trump requires careful attention to actions rather than statements. The Minneapolis pullback might persist or could vanish when the news cycle shifts. His Iran threats might lead to real action or could be empty posturing. The Venezuela commitment might hold or could be abandoned when inconvenient. With Trump, there's persistent disconnect between rhetoric and action. Flashy, shocking announcements generate attention, but subsequent follow-through matters most. He has demonstrated a pattern of announcing major initiatives that quietly disappear once media attention wanes.